that response from Senator Fonfara, who I have great respect for, and I don't disagree with the assessment of the policy overall, and I'm in agreement that having a straight line depreciation from a starting point is probably better for taxpayers to have some, as was mentioned, predictability and understanding of what their tax bill might look for like in the future. But my question really is why the increase? I mean, we've already got that. That was passed, as I mentioned, I think in the 22 implementer. But here we are making a change to that. We're making a change to increase that number. I would presume that back in 22, when this was looked at, all of the stakeholders, including the representatives of the municipalities and so forth, would have looked at this schedule and had a pretty good inclination as to what the tax revenue might be. I mean, the argument's being made that the reason why we're doing this is predictability. Well, if that's the case, then they would have had that predictability when it was passed in 2022. I'm not understanding why this is necessary today, and that's really what I'm driving at. The good senator mentioned this is the recommended solution. Who recommended the solution through you?
Senator Fonfara.
Through you, Madam President. This has been a 2-year, or if not longer, effort, actually started before 2022, in terms of various parties, municipal officials, state officials at the table coming up with these recommendations. As the gentleman is well aware, I believe that the reason we're here primarily today is because of the recommended changes that were passed in 22 would have led to where we are today if we don't pass something this week, that we would see commercial motor vehicle owners seeing a substantial increase in their tax bill due to being taxed for those 46 towns above the 32.46 mill rate. And so this was and has been an ongoing effort on a number of parties to come together and make decisions as to how to address the commercial motor vehicle process for valuation, as well as addressing the other issues as identified in my opening remarks, including using the use of the MSRP versus the NADA approach, the scale being imposed, a declining scale, and as I understand it, the determination to set the rate at 85 versus 80 and continuing that down through over the, I believe it's 20 years, is the schedule. Through you.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate that answer, but again, I think we're getting off track here. We are discussing something that is current law. The MSRP and the depreciation schedule is current law, and if we did not show up today, that's already happening. And I have already stated that I think there's a unanimous agreement that we need the fix to the corporate or commercial vehicle situation. But again, from my perspective, I didn't vote for that either. In fact, I don't know that any Republicans voted to tax commercial vehicles as personal property. I don't think any of us did. So for me, that is a separate situation. I'm here today gladly in support of that piece of this bill. And if I was presented with that on its own, I'd vote for it all day long. See, you guys messed up. I'm glad we're here to fix it, and I will put my stamp of approval on that as well. But I don't want to make this debate about that, because we're all in agreement about that. The thing that I have a concern about is the schedule that appears on page 7 of this 137-page bill that very clearly increases the amount of the assessment on everyone's car tax going forward. And this is going to be a permanent change over the current law. Now, there's some discussion about what the law used to be and how COVID impacted the value of cars and people got a higher tax rate. And now going to this more stable MSRP-based straight line depreciation model is beneficial. No disagreement, but that's the current law. What we're doing here is to make a new law, and the new law is to change that current law. And what I'm trying to understand is why we are going to increase everybody 5% over the next 20 years and beyond. I don't understand where that comes from. My first question was, why didn't we just leave it at fix the car tax, where we can all agree? And the answer was, this was the suggested recommendation. And I don't mean to press the good senator, but he said this is the recommended solution, but I didn't hear who actually recommended it. If it's a matter of the towns are concerned about, a loss of revenue, I believe they have a mechanism already in place to adjust their mill rate. To do so, maybe they're uncomfortable doing that because of appearance's sake. But the fact of the matter is there's numerous steps along the way where the amount people are taxed can be adjusted. It just so happens that one of those steps is right here today in this room on page 7 of this bill, which says we're going to increase that value of each car by 5%. And I'm hesitant to do that, naturally. I've made a promise to my constituents that I'm not going to raise taxes. Anytime there's anything that even sniffs like a tax increase in this room, I'm the first person to stand up and go, no, we don't want to do that. People in Connecticut are already taxed way too much. We need to start going in the other direction. So I guess I'll ask a more direct question, which is, if this bill does not pass today, will people across the state of Connecticut pay more or less car tax going forward? Through you.
Senator Von Farah.
Through you, Madam President, they'll pay more because, as I'm looking at a run currently, that towns across the state of varying degrees, from 14% down to 2%, all will see less revenue. Towns will receive less revenue with the passage of this legislation due to this change. That means if towns are receiving less revenue, motor vehicle owners are paying less. They'll see a reduction in their bills with the passage of this from 14 down to 2%. Every town will see less revenue with the passage of this, which means if the towns are receiving less revenue, taxpayers, motor vehicle owners are paying less in car tax.
Thank you. Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much for the answer, Madam President, but I heard two different answers. The first response was a very clear yes, this will increase folks' car tax. And then the follow-up to that was that the towns are going to be receiving less revenue, which would indicate that they're going to be receiving less car tax. I'm looking at two fundamental changes that are in the bill that is before us. One of them is to correct something that has not gone into effect yet, which is the taxation of commercial vehicles as personal property, which I think is a mixed bag, by the way. We were talking earlier, there are towns across Connecticut that have very low mill rates. Town of Greenwich, I believe, is 27 is the mill rate. So if you start taxing business vehicles at that rate, the personal property rate, they're probably paying less than the car tax in other situations. I don't know the exact parameters, but it's certainly a negative for folks that have commercial vehicles in some of our major cities where we have exorbitant property taxes, like the city of Waterbury, which I represent, which has a mill rate in the 50s. You can't be doing that to people. You can't be charging them on their commercial vehicle an exorbitant amount above what it might be for a personal property tax on a car. I got a little sidetracked, but that was the one fundamental change we all agree with. But the other part is this schedule on page 7, which shows a 5% increase. So I was asking a question. But my mom taught me don't ask questions you don't know the answer to. So I'm trying my best to stick to that rule. And when I look at this page, it tells me that folks are going to pay 5% more property tax on vehicles if this bill passes, because we've already adopted this MSRP schedule. That's in the law. It's in effect right now. It might not have been enacted because the language is supposed to take effect on the grand list for 24, I believe. But that is the law. And if we do nothing today, that's the way it's going to work. But this language that's before us is going to change that depreciation schedule to the detriment of taxpayers who own personal vehicles. Am I incorrect about that, through you?
Thank you, Senator Fonfara.
Madam President, if the gentleman could repeat his question, there was a long statement in there, and I didn't quite hear the question, but I'll be glad to entertain it if he would ask it again.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate that. I'm sorry. I got involved in trying to describe what's happening in the bill so that people who are listening can understand. But very simply, does the schedule that is from lines 151 to 170 showing a 5% increase for each year represent a increase in the amount people will see in their auto tax bills? Through you.
Thank you, Senator Fonfara.
The answer to that is no, because the legislation has not ever been enacted. It's not current law. It's scheduled to go into effect in October. We're here to say we're not having that go into effect, and this is the schedule that we are adopting or seek to adopt, which would result in a reduction in what the average person will see a reduction in their car tax bill. Through you.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate the answer, and I don't mean to disrespect the senator or disagree with him, but I don't think that's an accurate statement. The fact of the matter is the current law is based on a schedule similar to this. In fact, this bill amends the current law. Now, as was noted, it hasn't taken effect because that law says that this schedule doesn't begin until the 24 grand list. And I get that, but that is the law. To say that the law hasn't been passed or enacted is not accurate. That is the law. If we do nothing today, somebody who owns a year one vehicle like on line 154, or I'm sorry, T54, which is, I guess, a new way of numbering these things in the schedule. But anyway, it says that they're going to pay 80%. And if this bill is passed, they're going to pay 85%. And that, I hate to just like beat a dead horse asking the same question over and over again. But if we do not pass this today, am I correct to say that this that year one person would pay at this 80% schedule against the MSRP? Is that correct, through you?
Senator Fonfara.
Through you, Madam President, that would happen, and so would we've discussed this, but I must reiterate that it will have a detrimental effect on on all commercial motor vehicle owners, and so there are significant consequences to not passing this. At the same time, motor vehicle owners, non-commercial, will see, well, all motor vehicle owners will see a reduction due to the legislation that is before us. They'll pay less in car tax with the passage of this legislation. Through you.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. So we keep going around in the same kind of conversation, which is that we recognize that the bill contains a lot of moving parts, including this commercial vehicle fix, which I will state once again, we all support. And I will also once again suggest that I didn't vote for the change that caused the problem. So, it's one of these things, it's very difficult sometimes when the majority has an agenda and they're moving their policies and you don't support them. And then later on, there's a correction invariably to something that got messed up with that policy. And now I've got to decide how I'm going to handle it. I'm like, well, I didn't vote for that to begin with. So I don't feel any ownership of the problem with that tax, other than I want to protect my constituents back home, and I certainly want them to know I'm in support of anything that's going to reduce the taxes that they're paying. But I think they know that. I think my constituents know where I'm coming from. But what I'm concerned with is that we couldn't just have a clean bill here. We couldn't just come up here and say, oh my God, we got this problem with this corporate, their commercial vehicles are going to get taxed as personal property in some towns, and that's going to be crazy. We have to fix it, and do that. We couldn't do that. Why not? That's my big question. Because to me, that's what you do. You come up here, you fix the problem, and you leave. But instead, the majority said, well, we're going to fix the problem. But at the same time we're going to fix the problem, we're going to do 130 some odd pages of other stuff. And one of the other things we're going to do is we're going to take that away on one hand, but we're going to charge people more on their personal property tax on the other. Because the schedule is obvious. Everyone's personal property car tax is going to go up 5% on this schedule. And I have a difficulty putting my John Hancock on that, or pressing my green button here to suggest that that's a good idea, because I don't believe it is. And as a result of that, Madam President, let me offer an amendment. It's LCO 6220. I asked the clerk to call it, and I'll be allowed to summarize.
Mr. Clerk.
LCO number 6220, Senate Amendment A.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Madam President. This is a very straightforward amendment. It takes this giant omnibus, 130-plus page bill, and simply modifies the schedule that I've been referring to for the last 15 minutes that is in Section 3 of the bill, and it is on page 7. And what it does is it eliminates the changes that are in the proposed bill before us, increasing the property tax amounts 5% each year, and leaves it at the current law. This will result in a reduction in the amount people are charged for their automobile property taxes versus the bill that will be voted on today. I move adoption. I would ask for a roll call vote. It's a very straightforward vote, folks. Do you want people to pay more car taxes or less? If you want them to pay less car taxes, you support the amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Fonfara.
Thank you, Madam President. I ask that members oppose the amendment.
Thank you. Will your
Amendment A, Senate Bill 501. Total number voted 29.